I made 500 resin ghosts to hide at Dragon Con, and I want to show you my exact process. I started with this. It's a little ghostie boy I made about a year ago out of oven-baked polymer clay. I decided I wanted my master to be smooth and glossy, so I made a junk mold and cast a copy out of epoxy resin. Next is the tedious task of polishing it to a glass-like finish. I start by wet sanding the bottom flat with a high grit sandpaper. I think this is about 800 or maybe 1000 grit. Then I'll move on to Zona papers. These are polishing papers that range from 30 microns down to 1 micron. I have them cut into strips and labeled on the back the order that I need to use them in. The clay ghost was sanded to a fine grit before I cast it, so I'll only need to use these to polish it. I won't bore you with showing the process for every color, but pretty much I'm just sanding with the papers one color at a time in order until I get through all 6 colors. And when I'm done, I get a master that has a glossy finish. You might notice that I didn't polish the eyes and the mouth. That's so that the paint will stick easier to the rough surface. So, now that I have my first master done, I'm going to make a quick mold of it using a disposable medicine cup that has been trimmed down and had a hole cut in the bottom. I'll stick the ghostie to a piece of packing tape and then put the cup around it. Next, I'm sealing it to the tape with some hot glue. And drowning the poor little ghost in silicone rubber for 4 hours. After 4 hours, the silicone is cured and I can remove the mold from the cup. Then I can cut some notches and place it into a new cup so I can mold the cap. I'm not showing some of the steps here, like spraying the top with mold release or putting the mold into the pressure pot, but we'll get into that later when I make the big production mold. Now that the first mold of my master is done, I'm going to start casting many more ghosties to use when I make my mega production mold. I'm casting these secondary masters in polyurethane because the kind that I have cures quickly, about 30 minutes. I'm casting in a pressure pot to crush any bubbles that might form. But this kind of polyurethane cures white and it's cool to watch, so I filmed one so you can see it kick off. Once the ghostie is cured, I remove it from the pressure pot and poop it out. And then I do that a lot. Next, I'm taking some of this cheap vinyl sticker paper that I bought from Dollar Tree. If you're not familiar, this is the stuff that crafters will make those die-cut letter decals out of. I could have also used shelf liner, but the pink will make it easier for you to see what I'm doing. Also from the dollar store is 2 of these plastic leftover containers. I'm going to start by drawing an even line around the bottom of the container, and then use some scissors to cut off the part that is below the line. Next, I'm cutting the bottom of the container off. If this all seems backwards and crazy, stick with me. There is a method to my madness that is better explained in my cap mold tutorial video. I've peeled the backing off the vinyl and set it sticky side up. I also need to know where to place the ghosties in the mold, so I'm tracing the plastic container with a marker. Now I have to carefully arrange the ghosts so I can fit as many in the mold as possible and still have a nice gap between them. While I do that, now would be a great time for you to help me grow my channel by booping the like and subscribe buttons. Once they're all stuck down, I can seal the edge of my mold to the vinyl with hot glue. I'm using a 2-part silicone rubber to make the mold, so I need to carefully pour equal parts of A and B by volume and stir until it's all one consistent color and there are no more streaks. I want to make sure I'm scraping the sides and getting it all mixed thoroughly. Next, I want to get as much air out of the silicone as possible, and I do that with a vacuum chamber. Then just pour the silicone into the mold from one spot as carefully as possible. I'm doing this in the pressure pot because I think the silicone is too heavy for the thin vinyl and might rip the bottom off the mold if I try to move it. I'm casting the silicone under pressure, again, to help reduce bubbles. Once the mold is cured, I can clean it up and cut the keys into the top. These notches will help me line up the cap properly. So, now I need to make the cap for this cap mold. I'm going to push my mold into this new container until it's nice and tight, and then mark the bottom with a marker. Then I'm going to trim off the excess container with an X-Acto knife. I'm doing this because I don't want to risk the silicone leaking into the extra space underneath the mold. Now, silicone will stick to silicone. So I take the mold outside and give it some light coats of mold release. All I have to do now is mix up a smaller batch of silicone and pour it into my mold to make the cap. The whole process of mixing, degassing, and curing under pressure is the same as it was for the body of the mold. 4 hours later, it's all cured and I can pop the cap off. Clean up any extra flashing with scissors and a cuticle trimmer. Then start taking all the masters out of the mold so I can get casting. I actually think I made this mold a bit too thick, because getting all the ghosts out quickly is not very easy. Now that I have this huge mold, I need to figure out how much resin it is going to take to fill it. I can do that by just filling a small mold with water, dumping it out, and then measuring how much volume it takes. One ghost is about 2.5 milliliters, and there's about 40 ghosts in this mold, so I should need around 100 milliliters. Just to be on the safe side and have extra to spill out, I'm going to mix up 120 milliliters. This resin is a translucent polyurethane, so I'm going to mix in some pink dye to part A, pour them together, and then add in some glitter and foil flakes. Then just mix them together. It's gonna be messy, so I'm going to pour the resin into the mold inside the pressure pot. And then cap the whole thing off. Once the resin has cured in the pressure pot, all I have to do is remove the ghosties from the mold. And trim the flashing off with an X-Acto knife. To paint the faces, I'm going to just dab a bit of black acrylic paint into the eyes and mouth and then wipe the extra away with a finger. Soon I'll have a whole bunch of pink ghosts. Then, I just keep repeating the process again and again and again until I have 500 tiny ghosts ready to go. The last step is to get business cards printed out and then use glue dots to stick the ghosties to the cards. My hope is that people will find these little guys and share a picture of them online. To prepare for the convention, I made a small box of ghosts already stuck to the cards to take with me on my carry-on, so they're ready to go when I land. The rest I put into 2 bags so I can assemble them as I hide them. Now it's time to go to DragonCon!